This is the story of how, as a young girl, I experienced some simple and genuine acts of kindness when I was ill. And they, for me, were real genuine acts of care. And the story is called Dr. John. I was 8 years old and hadn't been well at school for a while, a week or so. Abdominal pains and an upset stomach. And this story begins on the night that my mother had sent me to bed early with a hot water bottle in the hope that the pains would be better by the morning. So there I was, in bed, in the bedroom of my childhood. It was a small, oblong, salmon pink room with a window next to my bed that looked up the lane. And at the bottom of my bed was my pride and joy, a beautiful doll's house with a beautiful, crisp red door. And next to that, there was a chair with all my school bag packed and uniform ready for the next day. But as the evening progressed, the pains didn't get less. In fact, they began to grow and throb and pulsate, and it felt like they were swelling fast, like a sponge taking on water. And then all of a sudden, without any warning, there was a crack of pain. I felt it searing through my body. Before I could do anything, I was on all fours with animal noises coming out of my mouth like I'd never heard before. I could hear my mum's footsteps on the stairs outside. She came into my bedroom and burst in. She took one look at me and yelled to my father to call for a doctor. She knelt down beside me and started stroking my leg in a really strange way. And it was something about the way she was looking at me. She kept saying, "It'll be all right, Sue, it'll be all right." But I could tell that her eyes didn't believe what her lips were saying. I was hot, and the doctor's hands were really cold on my stomach as he prodded. He was in my bedroom with my parents, and they were doing that thing that adults do sometimes when they don't say anything but look at each other in an adult way. But you know something's not right. They went out onto the landing, and they were whispering, but I could hear certain words. I could hear ambulance, serious, hospital immediately. And for the first time, I began to feel really frightened. I could almost taste it. Sour. I heard the siren first, before I saw the blue light reflected off the walls of my room. My father came into my bedroom and picked me up and carried me down the stairs out to the waiting ambulance. I got in with my mother as we started to course through the night with the siren blaring round and round roundabouts, the clatter of instruments, the noise seemed overwhelming. And my mother did the strangest thing. She just put her hands over my ears and somehow everything felt all right. When I arrived at the hospital, they put me on a trolley and started wheeling me down a very long corridor. Mum and Dad were beside me and I could see double doors at the end. They pushed me through the double doors into a really large, white, bright room with strip lights and metal instruments everywhere and a smell that smelled kind of sterile. And my parents were nowhere and they were just strangers all around me. There were noise and they were prodding and talking and speaking and then a strange thing happened. The noise seemed to get less and everyone seemed to be getting further and further away. You know, like when you get a pair of binoculars and you turn them up the wrong way and look through them? And that's when it happened. That's when I saw my angel. I'd been taken into a small side room. I was on my own, lying on a bed with lots of big, like, machines all round my head, and beside me some shelves with lots of glass bottles on them. I was on my own and it was cold, and I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, there he was, smiling at me, with his red glowing halo. And as my eyes focused, the halo turned to a mop of red, curly hair. "Hello, Sue," he said, smiling. "Look." He got hold of one of his ginger curls and got hold of a lock of mine and touched them together. "Look," he said, "we are red-headed brother and sister, and everything is going to be all right." Everything was going to be all right. This angel, this My red-headed brother has just told me everything's going to be all right. He explained that his name was Dr. John and that it was his job to put me to sleep and that when I woke up I'd be back in the ward and everything would be fine. 10, 9, 8, gone. And while the surgeons worked on me that night, I later heard that there were other energies afoot. My father paced up and down outside the operating theatre for the 5 hours I was in there, and my mother sat beside my empty bed on the ward, waiting for me to return. And both my grandfathers, at opposite ends of the country, went out into the night to find a church, a building neither of them had been into since their own childhood. But they went in to sit quietly and asked that their red-headed granddaughter should be allowed to stay, that the natural order of things should remain. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the ward, and the first person I saw was my mother, with my father sitting beside her. She said nothing. She just took hold of my hand and squeezed it tight. I was in a 6-bedded ward. I was right in the corner with a window next to me, and then next to me was a bed, and in that bed was Maureen Little, and Maureen Little was to become my best friend, because this ward was to be my home for the next 3 months. So I had to get used to quite a few new things. I had to get used to letting people go. Mum and Dad would come as they could, and I had to let other people in. Nurses, doctors, anaesthetists, physios, cleaners, tea ladies, dinner ladies. I had to get used to a whole new vocabulary of what was happening to me. Ruptured appendix, abdominal surgery. Peritonitis, abdominal surgery. Adhesions and ulceration, abdominal surgery. And throughout it all, Dr. John, with his smile and laugh. He even changed his shift once after my tears, so he could be with me for what he hoped would be my last surgery. He made me laugh. So I settled into the rhythm of the ward. I got used to that kind of radioactive, bright orange tomato soup that we'd have every day. I got used to sort of my really random obsession with collecting all the stitches they took out after every surgery and keeping them in a Tic-Tac tin. But the one thing I loved above everything else was the stories. Because I had lots of visitors, grannies and grandfathers and parents and teachers and friends, and once they'd asked me how I was, they weren't too sure what else to do, so they read me stories. And after they'd gone, I'd read them to Maureen. Maureen had only arrived from Jamaica a year before her accident, a lorry, and she'd been in hospital for 6 months before I got there and couldn't sit up. So I'd read stories to her. Sometimes I'd wash her feet, but mainly I'd read her stories. And after the lights went out, we made them up. And Maureen would take me to the most incredible places. We'd be fighting our way through dripping rainforest, searching for the magical drum maker, or diving down into crystal clear waters, looking for the magical pearls. And I'd take her on great quests over mountains and rolling hills, into deep oak forests, looking for dragons. It was as if our imagination had run wild. It was like time had stood still. But it hadn't quite stood still. And the day eventually came when I was well enough to leave. And it was with mixed feelings that I packed up all my belongings with my mum in the cabinet beside my bed. I said a tearful goodbye to Maureen and promised I would visit her regularly. And then I heard his laugh. And the next thing I see is a mop of red hair, a huge grin, his stethoscope flying behind him. He runs up to me, picks me up, throws me over his shoulder, and runs round and round the ward up to the nursing station, back past all the beds so I could say goodbye to everybody, showing off his newly healed red-headed sister. And when he put me back down again beside my bed, he reached deep into the pocket of his white coat and took out a small envelope with my name on it. "Read it when you get home," he said, as he ruffled my hair, and was gone. So when I got home, everything was just as it had been when I left all those weeks before. But I didn't feel just as I had been. I'd been to the realm of illness and healing, and I'd met so many different people, different ages, backgrounds, experiences. I knew I'd carry those with me and never be quite the same person that I was before. And so when I was sitting back on my bed in that salmon pink bedroom, I decided to open my letter. And the first thing that fell out was a small lock of red hair. And then a note. It said, "Dear Sue, you have been such a brave young girl. You've been very ill, and you have a gift. Life. Take that gift and your smile and your gorgeous golden hair and go out and greet the world, and the world will greet you right back. Your red-headed brother, Dr. John." Well, that lock of hair and that note have been lost down the years, but those experiences and his words have never, ever left me. And when I've reflected on it, I've thought that he took that moment, that small window, and did something small and simple. He held me in my fear when I first arrived, and in a strange way was helping me transition back into the real world when you've been in that strange hospital environment for all that time. And he really did teach me the power that all of us have to recognise those small moments of opportunity to act, to meet someone in their vulnerability before that window closes. And personally, I've experienced the impact of how that never quite leaves you. It stays with you and ripples on through your life. They're the things I remember about that hospital stay as a small child.